Good morning. Hello. Welcome to the African Esquire Show on WCC TV. I'm your host, Tony Cherie. I hope everyone is doing well. You can let me know how you're doing in the comments section. So everyone, we have an interesting conversation, one that I think that is very much needed, and I think for this channel, very overdue, about the tech, the health, the philanthropist, the billionaire Bill Gates. And this is going to be an important conversation because I think unlike anyone else inside of the bourgeoisie, capitalist, Western white supremacist class, Bill Gates gets to kind of go in and out of Africa, unlike anyone probably that we've ever seen. And because of his guise of being a philanthropist, of being someone who's trying to help the poor Africans, a lot of people will ignore his legacy, a lot of things that he does. So we're going to talk about that really quickly, though. I do want to make a couple of announcements. So as you saw in the preview video, AUMD, Africa Unity Movement for Decolonization, we are still registering people for this convention. It's going to be a very important convention. I hope you all will join this conversation because ultimately, what are we doing if we're not trying to abolish neocolonialism? What are we doing if we're not trying to end this system? We could talk all day about the system. We could talk all day about how the system affects us. We could talk all day about the history of colonialism. But unless we're actually willing to come together and really lay out what the problems are that our people are facing, we're just going to keep continuing to face this huge problem that all of our people are all pulled into throughout the world. So if you will please register for the convention. We are almost at an important benchmark. We're trying to get about I think like under 10 more people to register so we can hit an important benchmark to go forward with a lot of the different parts of the program. So even if you're not sure if you can attend, please do register so that we can maybe you can register, and if you're not able to attend, you can catch the playback and then let someone else go in your place. But regardless, please support this important initiative. It's a number of organizations, not just WCC, a number of Pan-Africanist organizations coming together to have this conversation. And again, also, if you're an organizer who is trying to push for food sovereignty, again, we have a sweepstakes, a $10 entrance fee for the chance to win $500 towards your organizing work. If you go to wechargecolonialism.org, and you can see the sweepstakes, Africans Return to the Soil. Please enter, and so that we can hopefully encourage more of our people to achieve sovereignty on our own accords. And that's something that we have to take serious as well. Now, the Bill Gates thing, by the way, is going to go from it's probably going to be a few weeks. I'm going to have to cover this, and I don't even know if it's going to be week after week, because there's just so much, as I started researching him, so many things he's into, so many type of ventures that he has been doing throughout the African continent that it would really be a disservice to try to cram it all into 1 hour and a half video. So, but I'm relating that to him because one part that we're going to cover eventually is going to be his push for basically making African agriculture this tech thing where it's going to be GMO foods and all these things like that. And it's going to be able to feed everyone, right? That's what he's telling people. So when we're talking about Africans Return to the Soil, we're talking about all of us taking it serious that we have to learn to farm, we have to learn to make our own food. And if we're not able to do that, then as this road is going a certain way, and we can all see the way that the road is going, like it just takes observation and just truthfulness to see that things are not going a positive way for the Western society. Africans must be able to go the opposite way and say, we're not going to go into this world where we're dependent on you. We're going to go to a world where we can do for ourselves. And so that's something that we are trying to encourage with the sweepstakes. So please visit our website. All right, everyone. So I hope everyone's good this morning. And let's go ahead and talk about the subject. So I'm actually going to open this up with just a quick clip of Bill Gates, this philanthropist who supposedly cares so much about Africa that he's gone out of his way, at least this is what we're told, he's gone out of his way a number of times to donate money to different causes in the African continent. So we're going to talk through this video, and we're going to get to it.
Digital technologies and mobile phones.
Let's turn this up for you.
To sequencing genomes of seeds could play a very big role in farming in Africa. How big of a role do you see small farmers playing in this effort? Are you focusing on bigger farmers? Just how is this going to play out?
We are quite focused on smallholder farmers because the predominant number of Africans farming today are smallholder farmers, and they're on pieces of land that are less than 2 hectares. So it's quite a small farm. There are agro dealers that exist in these countries. We need to get that network up and running, just like we've got the vaccine network up and running and getting vaccines out, getting up and running. So they're teaching people proper planting, proper fertilize, proper irrigation, and getting them new seeds as they come.
Now I want to pause right there because the idea of these people teaching these people, anyone who's ever been to Africa, talked to anyone that's actually on the African continent about farming, they know how to farm. Like, we don't need you to come in and teach us how to farm. So just that right there, that white paternalistic attitude of, we're going to teach you how to irrigate, we're going to teach you how to seed properly, that in itself should be a red flag.
Out. There's fantastic technology going on for pest-resistant seeds, for drought-resistant seeds, flood-resistant seeds as the rains come at different times. And so as people are educated about them and they start to see their neighbors getting, a third more yield off their farm, they say, I want those. So getting those systems up and running. Again, one of the most promising places we see that happening is Ethiopia today. They really have gotten their infrastructure and agriculture working, and that will lift up not just farmers on their own farm so they have more to eat, but they can put it on the local market and it lifts up the economy.
So there's been talk of concern with this is that in this particular clip, they're talking about the fact that their solution to the problems in Africa, essentially giving them seeds that are going to be genetically modified. Again, we're going to get more in depth about that issue inside of a follow-up video. So we probably have to do this in 3 parts. And I don't know, again, if it's going to be sequential. I might have to take a break if something big happens that I also want to report on. But so essentially the idea that these Africans want these seeds, and this is the problem with being a powerless people, because I have had conversations, if anyone knows, I'm very interested in agriculture. I'm very interested in communal farming, things like that, as something that I want to pursue inside of a future date. And so there's a lot of talk whenever you talk to people who are actually doing this. It is a lot cheaper to just take these seeds that are genetically modified. It is a lot cheaper to do these types of pest resistance. But the other backhanded thing is that these things also have a negative effect on Africa, and has a negative effect on even on the soil. And that kind of lets you know right there, these people are double talking, because at one time they're saying, oh, we care about the environment, and yet they're going to push or offer things that are going to give people very easy farming habits instead of having to do the traditional farming. And that same thing goes against what they say they want. They say that they want a world that is clean. They want to prevent climate change. Everyone who knows about the GMOs know that those actually go opposed to climate change, or what they say it's what they're telling us is happening to the environment. So let's listen some more about Bill Gates, and this is really, I think, is really telling about what his thoughts are about us inside of this experiment that they're doing on Africa.
Food problem.
Yeah, what are called GMOs are done by changing the genes of the plant, and it's done in a way where there's a very thorough safety procedure, and it's pretty incredible because it reduces the amount of pesticide you need, raises productivity, can help with malnutrition by getting vitamin fortification, and so I think for Africa, this is going to make a huge difference, particularly as they face climate change. The increased productivity and resilience of the seeds, most of which will come from the new scientific techniques. So the gene editing just allows that to be done in a more precise way than it's ever been done in the past. So it'll accelerate the rate of innovation.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a certain naivete that without that, it could be done anyway? That you've seen the results on the ground of conventional.
The Africans, it's up in the air, and
the Africans is up in the air. Listen closely to this part.
Kenya just approved BT maize. The Europeans have decided they don't want to use it, most of them, which is fine. They're not facing malnutrition and starvation. If they want to pay a premium for food of a kind, it's not a huge deal. The U.S., China, Brazil are using these things. And if you want farmers in Africa to improve nutrition and be competitive on the world market, as long as the right safety things are done, that's really beneficial. It's kind of a
So did you all catch that? They're talking about GMO foods and the issue with GMOs. Again, we'll get more to detail on those. But the issue is that European countries have done extensive research on GMOs that that America will not do, that other countries just won't do. So they've done extensive research on GMOs, and because of that, they have a number of regulations and have rejected a lot of these products. America, maybe they're just trying to kill all of us. They have not rejected it despite all of that. Yet the issue is that, well, it's okay if Europeans don't want to buy these products, but Africans who are poor and malnourished, they're going to need it anyways, even though these products have been proven to be low quality. Africans who are desperate and malnourished, they're still going to take it anyways. I wanted to start with that video because this is essentially what you will see as the theme with Bill Gates all throughout the African experience. He comes in with this supposed philanthropic agenda. He wants to help people. But the issue is that the people who he's trying to help are people who are powerless, people who are desperate in many cases. Because we're powerless as a people, because we are not organized, and because we are basically a free-for-all, many of our people fall for these things. Many of our people fall for these alternatives without any real questioning. You know, why is it that we're taking things that the Europeans have rejected? Why is it that we're allowing this person to come in and make these agendas for us, who is a multi-billionaire who benefits from our wealth, who makes products in Microsoft that benefits from our wealth, who's gotten rich off of the rating of the African continent and off of the resources of the African continent. But unfortunately, someone like Bill Gates has a plethora of donations he has been giving to the multimedia entities, and so they'll never actually question him. As you saw, he was getting interviewed by the World Economic Forum. There were so many interviews of this man on CNN, on different types of major media entities, and of course, they'll never ask the hardball questions. They'll never ask about the fact that you're suggesting that you have a solution to climate change, and then you're pushing things that have been said to have caused or further climate change in the African continent. They'll never question the fact that you're trying to supposedly feed people who are malnourished with things that are going to have adverse health effects. And that's why we have to be the ones that have these conversations. And I'm saying that because I noticed that when it comes to many in the African liberation space, we have certain triggers that will prevent us from investigating certain people. So, for example, with Bill Gates, he has been accused. This is something we're also going to cover inside of a later video. He's been accused of having an agenda of depopulation. Now, we hear this and we say, well, okay, who are the people who are offering this information? And we're told things without actually knowing whether it's true or not. We're told that the people who are pushing this narrative are people who are right-wing groups who basically want to push pro-life agendas inside of Africa, and they are people who don't mean well for Africa. And that characterization will have us afraid, some of us afraid to even look at the veracity of these claims. So someone like Bill Gates, he's been protected basically because of this idea that you're going to paint the people who criticize him as being right-wingers. And I did say in a previous video that I did previous video of how things are being used against us. The idea that, oh, these people are Republican, these people are Trump people. And that was really been used consistently inside of Africa. Any type of questioning of something, you'll say, well, this is the right wing that's spreading these conspiracies. This is not coming from the actual people. And that's really an arrogance in itself. We assume that our people do not have the intelligence to know when someone is doing bad to us. There are many Africans on the ground who have reported horrible things being done by this foundation. And because we assume that, well, you might be getting false information from some right-wing organization, or you're not able to tell and decipher yourself because you're just so influenced by anyone that comes in, that because of that, we won't even investigate. So that's what I'm going to try to do. We're not going to look at quote unquote conspiracies, although I am a conspiracy analyst, but we're going to look at things that are out there for all of us to see. I'm not going to go into like, okay, well, is this happening? Is this happening? We're just going to go to the facts and let the facts speak for itself and have an honest conversation about what's happening. Because if Africa, in my opinion, does not wake up to this specific individual as well as the global colonial system, we're going to see a very disparate Africa, a very controlled Africa. We're going to see an Africa that's potentially going to have many people who are lost to these type of globalist agendas. So with that, I'm going to actually go to some African news stories before we get more into Bill Gates. In this specific video, we're going to talk more about his agendas as far as control, as far as surveillance in the African continent. But first, there is so much happening, I'm sure all of you know, inside of the African continent. And we have to touch on it because, again, we have to keep this a Pan-African focused channel. So we're going to right now get into African news. All right, so the big one I'm sure many of you have heard of, and I'm going to share my screen right now. There's been coups happening all over. I'm sure all of you are well aware of this. And yesterday there was an attempted coup that was reported. Now this is BBC. I want to put disclaimers out there anytime that I go to. Honestly, there's not a lot of news entities that are, I would say, good as far as reporting on the African continent. Unfortunately, because obviously if you're getting money from the imperialists, you're able to have more notoriety and more visibility, and people who might be accurately reporting are kind of shut out. Even the website I'm going to also pull up for another story called Africa News, it turns out they're also backed up by imperialist money. So putting that disclaimer out there, this is what's being reported. Now they're saying many are dead after a coup attempt inside of Guinea-Bissau. Now, basically, attackers tried to kill the president and his entire cabinet at the government palace. Many others have been killed in the fighting. We don't know yet how many. Local media reported at least 6 deaths, 4 attackers and 2 guards. The attackers were linked to drug trafficking, they say, into the country without further details. Now, I don't know if that's really the truth, because one thing that I was hearing is that automatically the people are another possibility is that the people basically are encouraging these people basically because of not only the unstability, but also because of the threat of Islamic extremists, like groups inside of Guinea-Bissau that they're reporting, something that's been commonly reported inside of these West African Francophone countries. The gunfire erupted near the government buildings on Tuesday in the capital of a West African nation, where the president was attending a cabinet meeting. Security source who did not want to be identified told BBC that gunmen in civilian clothes had opened fire and a police officer had been killed. Some initial reports also said that the cabinet had been captured. However, the attackers supposedly failed to break into the cabinet. Guinea-Bissau, with a population of just under 2 million people, is one of the poorest countries in the world. And the former Portuguese colony has seen 9 coup attempts or attempted coups since 1989. I mean, 1980, do my math, it's about a little over 40 years. 9 coup attempts. That's like averaging 2 to 3 coups every single decade. That's crazy. But of course, this is something that we understand inside of colonialism. So struggling with a massive foreign debt and an economy that relies heavily on foreign aid, the country has also become a transit point for Latin American drugs, leading to it to be dubbed as some of Africa's first narco state. And that right there tells you, first of all, if that's true, that this is really a hub for Latin American drugs, clearly the people who are actually in the country are not the ones that are doing that, because you have to cross an entire ocean to get to Latin America. So that would mean that the government officials are the ones that are doing that, if that is true. So, they're saying that this is an isolated group. We don't know if that's true. We don't know if it is true. Of course, with these imperialists, they want us to think that everything is isolated, that nothing has to do with them. Something to keep a note of, though, is that this is another coup inside of, again, an ECOWAS country. So if this was successful, that would have mean 4 out of 15 countries inside of West African economic bloc would have experienced coups within 2 years. So this is something serious in their eyes. Trust me, they are very concerned. And unfortunately, the thing that I think could happen is that Africans experience a heightened security state because of things like this. Meaning, kind of think about like back in during enslavement of Africans in America. If something like this were to happen, if there were a rebellion, then the slave owning class would come down 10 times harder on all Africans, right? And this is something that I think is a real risk. It kind of justifies more of a surveillance state. happening inside of Africa, more intentional efforts to basically make sure that the people are not discussing unseating a president. So, which is why we have to not just have short-term plans, we have to have long-term plans. You know, if this coup is successful, if this coup is not successful, what are we going to do? If this was a fringe group, that's also a danger, because we want to make sure that we're not just being supposedly saved by a group that's not connected to an organization, but instead a movement on the ground. And the conditions in Guinea-Bissau are those that would warrant a real organizational effort, a real movement on the ground, because again, it's one of the poorest countries in Africa. It's a country that's dealing with horrible dependence on the Western states. So this is the type of country that you can have a revolution in. But unfortunately, again, whenever you are not organized, these are the things that can be easily upset. So that's something that we're definitely going to keep track of. In a related story, I also want to just talk a little bit more about Burkina Faso. So this is a related story because, again, last week, and this is within a week span, last week, Burkina Faso had a coup. Now, this is why I'm always reluctant to take positions on these coups. Sorry, let me tell them I don't want my cookies to be tracked. I don't see that. Okay. So Burkina Faso restores the constitution and names a coup leader president. Now, this is something that will definitely make them different from the coup that's happening in Mali. The coup in Mali, they have said straight up that we are going to redo this constitution. Burkina Faso, they're saying we want to keep the constitution, and instead the coup leader is going to be president. Red flag. That tells me automatically that this is not someone who was about liberation of the people, because it's not about individuals or changing a president. It's about getting rid, scrapping these colonial constitutions that were never created to free us in the first place. Many of these constitutions were written by or with our oppressors. So the fact that they want to keep the constitution that allowed them to be oppressed in the first place means that they are not working for the interest of the people. That's at least my quick take. We will see more whether I'm right or not as time goes on. So the military said that it restored the constitution after a week of taking power and has appointed the coup leader as the head of state for a transitional period. The move came after the AU suspended Burkina Faso for the takeover, and diplomats from West Africa and the United Nations pressed demands for a return to civilian rule. This civilian rule was never civilian rule. This is why this language we have to be very precise about. Allowing the outside oppressor to dictate what goes on inside of your economy is not civilian rule. This is colonial rule. And that's what we have to be very specific about. So it's, again, in a statement read on television on Monday, the military government announced that it approved the fundamental act that lifts the suspension of the Constitution, a move that has been declared after the coup on January 24th. So 37 article document that guarantees independence of the judiciary and a presumption of innocence, as well as basic liberties spelled out in the Constitution, such as freedom of movement, freedom of speech, all those good Western things. So in case anyone was very hopeful that this coup inside of Burkina Faso would turn out to be one way, again, never assume that that any type of African coup that's being led by a military junta is going to be for the people, unless we see the verbiage of revolution. Of course, Mali is, definitely showing some promising signs, which is why we have to talk about them right after, right? So let's talk about Mali, another country that had a coup last year and has basically still been ousted by the ECOWAS, by the African Union, by the ECOWAS, and they're also still talking about the possibility of the United Nations also ousting them. So, of course, if you haven't heard, it's been reported that Mali, the military junta, has ordered the ambassador of France to leave after the French country had made some negative comments about Mali. Now, I want to be a little bit more fairer inside of this analysis. A lot of people are cheering this on its face because, yes, you're breaking the ties with French colonialism, but let's just take our time and actually see what happened here. So it says French authorities reacted to Monday's announcement regarding the expulsion of its ambassador from Mali. The French foreign minister issued a brief statement saying it takes note of the announcement, expressing solidarity with his European partners also involved in the anti-jihadist mission, which is why you should understand that these French these French imperialists, they're not standing alone. That's another thing we have to be very careful about. Sometimes we see, oh, France has ties cut to Mali. Mali's free. No. There's other imperialists, other European partners that are also inside of the country that are they're allowed to navigate inside of this situation. And so don't think automatically that this is a suspension of colonialism. It is not yet that, although there are some promising things. Let's just be balanced. So the French Ambassador Joel Meyer has not been declared a persona non grata, but the government of Mali wished for him to leave the country, leave the territory within 72 hours for reasons related to the outrageous statements that were made against the transitional authorities, which were found unacceptable and which we have rejected, they say. So it's important also to say that, a lot of us were saying, oh, they've kicked him out. That's not necessarily what happened. They just asked for him to leave, which again is still a great statement or a great position. And the government added that these comments question both legality and legitimacy of the authority with which the French ambassador is accredited. This creates a very difficult situation because you cannot be accredited with authorities that you yourself do not recognize. A good point. Despite the hard words, Mali's foreign minister, now this is why I said be a little nuanced, was quick to clarify that the expulsion of French ambassador did not mean French nationals were not welcome in this country. He said the difference that we have with France does not affect French nationals who are among us, nor does it affect the French companies that can continue to go about their business here. That's a concerning statement right there. So I want to kind of just be fair to this. Yes, they took a step. They said, okay, you need to leave. Now, the problem I have with that, number one, is that they took that step and said that the ambassador had to leave because the French country has said things critical of the military junta. So it was not in itself like, oh, we've assessed how France has treated us. We've assessed how the French government treats Africans. And trust me, the French government has done horrible and continues to do horrible things, not just in this country, but throughout the African continent. But it wasn't that which moved them to basically make the ambassador leave. It was the fact that the French government officials have been saying negative things about the military junta. So that's one thing we have to contextualize, is that it's not necessarily like, oh, I just want to get rid of French colonialism. Yes, they've been doing great things as far as saying we're going to have a longer transition. We're going to have a Malayan language as our official language, but we can't treat these acts as if we want Sankara so best, I think, that sometimes we'll treat these acts as if they are just that. The other thing, though, of course, allowing the French companies, the French capitalists, to still be able to do as they will, or to actually, let me pull the exact thing he said. He said that you are welcome to continue to go about their business here, and the French remain welcome in Mali. So basically, continue going about your business. We know their business isn't good for us. Their business is exploiting us, is taking from us. So that's also concerning. Something that we noted last week or the week after on WCC's podcast and book club is very interesting. When there's a revolution or a military junta, you never see the business people get too nervous usually. Like you rarely see them flee. Now that does happen every once in a while. Like, I think when Rwanda, is the genocide, you've seen people fleeing, but overwhelmingly, they get to be very comfortable whenever there are these transitions in power. And that tells us that these people don't feel as though they are subject to the same atrocities that they accuse others of. Instead, they basically feel like they're free to do what they want in Africa. And even if there is a coup or a military junta, they're still allowed to keep their possessions. And so that's something that's very concerning. So again, we're hopeful for what's going on in Mali, but let's just again contextualize and make sure that we're cautious and not necessarily thinking that it's Sankara when it's like not Sankara, or thinking that it's an Nkrumah when it's not an Nkrumah. Let's allow this to play out over time and see what we see over time. Okay, then one more story that I thought was very interesting that's happening over in Rwanda. Actually, if I can find the story. So if anyone doesn't know, over in Rwanda, I actually have to dig this one up. Over in Rwanda, there was a vaccine mandate, and the mandate has people fleeing the country. So if I can find this, so y'all forgive me while I look this up. Okay, let's see. Okay, I can't find the exact one, but it's okay. I found another article that is talking about the same thing. So let's go through and see what's happening over in Rwanda with everyone's favorite Pan-Africanist, Kagame. Okay, so Rwanda deports Congolese fleeing vaccination. 100 Rwandans who arrived in the Democratic Republic of the Congo this week claiming to flee COVID-19 vaccination in their country have been sent back to Rwanda. All Rwandans staying illegally on the island located, I'm skipping words that I don't want to butcher, located on Lake Kivu, bordering DRC and Rwanda, were returned to their country on Thursday morning. Now, I just thought this was something important to note, that Rwanda has come down very hard on their people, basically, when it comes to the vaccinations. They're saying basically that you can't even be in public spaces when it comes to if you're not vaccinated. And that's like their straight out rule. Public spaces, not even like restaurants, like public spaces, period. And the question that I have that there's not a lot of information on online is that how are they enforcing this? Because one thing that comes to the African continent, when it comes to having these very stringent standards, the way that these are often enforced are through the military. And we know Rwanda, the reason why Rwanda gets to be this beautiful African country that everyone wants to flock to is because Rwanda is a police state. Literally, I mean, you cannot get away with doing certain things in Rwanda. You will get shuffled off to jail very quickly. Paul Kagame has given this image that Rwanda is all these great things because of his ability, when he's supported by the imperialists, to clamp down on the people and really make sure that they are orderly. So that's something very important to note. Whenever these mandates that go, I say, beyond what most countries throughout the world are doing. And he says every woman must be vaccinated if you want to go into a public space. And you have people fleeing into the Congo. I mean, when's the last time you heard of this? People fleeing into the Congo. That's something that we have to take note of. Like, what are the extremes that are happening inside of African countries in order to give this perception as being vaccinated? And that's something that's going to become a theme, I think, because right now we see people talking about Africa not being vaccinated as opposed to Europe and America. And so now there's going to be, I think, this shift to get people, many of whom are skeptical about taking the vaccination, to basically comply. And how that's going to be enforced many times, I think, could be through the military. If you don't know, whereas in the United States, the military is basically over there. In many African countries, the military is right there. And many African countries, the military, which are directly funded by the West, are literally like the police that are going throughout the community. And that's something that can seriously happen with our people. So it's something to keep note of. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how the vaccination issue could become more arbitrary and more surveillance driven. So with that, we've reached all of our African stories, and we're going to go back to talking about Mr. Bill Gates and his agenda in Africa. Okay, so why did I want to cover Bill Gates of all people? We've covered George Soros on this country, on this planet. Oh my gosh, on this channel. What am I doing? We covered George Soros. We covered Elon Musk. I think we covered Jeff Bezos. We covered Mark Zuckerberg. Why am I turning my gaze on Bill Gates? The actual story that caught my attention, that made me want to investigate him more or take more serious many of the claims that I felt were true, but I just never put the time in to look more into, is that the Gates Foundation has appointed a new trustee. Now, it's important to understand that the previous trustees were essentially Bill Gates, his wife, and I believe it was Warren Buffett, three white rich billionaires, right? And they were the trustees of this foundation. Now, basically, because Bill Gates and his wife are getting a divorce, he's trying to shift gears, and they're appointing different trustees other than themselves to the board. I think Warren Buffett may have actually resigned from his position. So he's been appointing new trustees. And one of the people who he chose is a Zimbabwean businessman, I believe he lives in the UK, who took an active role in trying to cause regime change inside of Zimbabwe against Robert Mugabe. Now, when I say active role, they're saying he was leading the charge. So let's look more into this article. This is on the Gray Zone. The new Gates Foundation trustee led the plot to overthrow Zimbabwean leader alongside the U.S. government. In a shakeup of an institution named for one of the world's wealthiest and most influential oligarchs, Zimbabwean businessman Strive Misayiwa was appointed to the Gates Foundation's Board of Trustees this January. He'll be joined on the board by a seemingly diverse cast of corporate elites known for their embrace of technocratic and neoliberal policies. Neoliberal is something that Bill Gates is going to be associated with many times throughout this video. Back in 2007, Mr. Yirwa, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that sort of right, helped orchestrate a failed coup attempt to overthrow the government of Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe alongside the United States and the Zimbabwean opposition party it was backing, the Movement for a Democratic Transition, okay? Both the Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency were made aware of the regime change plans by the Zimbabwean telecom magnate, Masiyiwa, and were advised by the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria, South Africa, to share elements of the U.S. government strategies with him. Someone so close that he has direct access to the Central Intelligence Agency, direct access to the U.S. government to share intelligence with them. This is the person who is now appointed to the Gates Foundation. Ms. Masiyiwa was listed in the U.S. diplomatic cables at the time as strictly protect, meaning he was an intelligence asset, or a confidential source, meaning he was an agent, basically. 15 years since the plot fizzled, Masiyiwa has materialized at the center of another global intrigue as tech billionaire Bill Gates rearranges his foundation. Now, of course, the question would be, why would Gates want someone with such a checkered past? You know, someone who works directly with the Central Intelligence Agency. I know some of you are probably going to answer this before I get to it, but why would he want someone who has worked directly with the Central Intelligence Agency, someone who has worked directly with the imperialist class to unseat a legitimate government? Robert Mugabe, you might not like him, but he was the president of Zimbabwe. And to unseat a legitimate person who is actually inside a government, isn't that something that you want to avoid? Unless the ultimate goal is that you want to get something out of that. Zimbabwe is always going to be a threat to the imperialists, because Zimbabwe is what happens whenever Africans decide that they want autonomy over their own lands, something that Bill Gates is absolutely against. Bill Gates has pushed for privatization. Bill Gates has pushed for control of the agriculture, control of the farming, and more, he's pushing different policies that are going to seek to ensure control of not just the agriculture, but of even the banking system inside of Africa. That's something that we're also going to touch on today. Now, keep in mind, so this is Bill Gates. He's trying to get rid of Robert Mugabe, president of Zimbabwe, right? Look at him with all of these people throughout the years. I mean, this man has a in with so many African presidents. Look at him with Cyril Ramaphosa. Look at him with Yoweri Museveni. Look at him with Paul Kagame, everyone's favorite Pan-Africanist. Look at him with Muhammadu Buhari, like president of Nigeria. This man has an in with so many African leaders. And yet, faces almost zero scrutiny. Can this be a theme? Well, I think so. I think that a lot of these people are being paid and bought for to allow this man to go in and out of African countries without little scrutiny. That's the big problem that I have of all things. Whereas people are comfortable being scrutinizing Mark Zuckerberg. People are comfortable scrutinizing like Jeff Bezos. A lot of people back down from scrutinizing Bill Gates because, oh my gosh, it's Bill Gates. He just wants to give everyone vaccines. He just wants to stop climate change. He just wants to help Africans. The problem with that is that this man has not even dual agenda. He has a singular agenda, but he has a facade in order to allow that agenda. That agenda is about control. And if we start understanding the language that these people are using at Davos, where they're talking about climate change, where they're talking about vaccinations, they're not really concerned with the conditions of the people on the ground. They're concerned with control of the African continent. They're concerned with the ability to control the economic commerce and also the politics. Because here you have someone who obviously has a problem with someone like a Robert Mugabe if he's going to appoint someone that literally tried to unseat him. Yet keeping close with the people who have a direct incentive to uphold the colonial state. Bill Gates defended capitalism at Davos a couple of years ago, got a lot of criticism because of it. His thing was, well, capitalism, it's done so much for us. Capitalism has done so much for you. That's the problem. Whenever people are allowed to give us these false narratives, capitalism has not done a lot for Africa. In fact, capitalism has only destroyed Africa. And yet, are we going to be truthful about the nature of our struggle against these systems? Are we going to allow these people to still steer the narrative? And I also want to show you this visual just so you understand a part of the reason why Bill Gates is so powerful. You can see right here, this man owns or funds a lot. From the World Health Organization, he gives a lot of funds to them. Gavi, we're going to talk about them in this video because something serious is coming out of that. John Hopkins, Oxford, CDC, BBC, our media action, so many things. A report was released recently that said that his man gives so much money to all of these different media entities. These things are closely correlated. The ability to be an angel to the public image, despite the fact that you are pursuing things that go adverse to the interest of the masses of Africans, that is something that's paid for. That's something that you have to establish a certain narrative through the media. This is why we cannot trust the media. This is why we cannot trust the media with anyone, but we certainly cannot trust them whenever they're trying to push a narrative that people are good for us, even when they're not. So let's talk a little bit about the issue of philanthropy. I talked about this. If you go back, I did a video about George Soros. And I talked about the fact that going back to you can really trace this type of model to people like Carnegie or the Rockefeller Foundation, how philanthropy has been used in order for capitalism to reign free without any checks on power. That's really what philanthropy is. That's just why there's a difference between talking about even we're talking about philanthropy versus talking about actually trying to lift up the people. Those are two very different things. Philanthropy is trying to preserve the class system. Philanthropy says that you few white people on top, you Africans and other indigenous people on the bottom, we'll throw you some crumbs. This crumbs are philanthropy. Therefore, we get to be the angels and we get to be the saviors, despite the fact that our direct interests go completely contrary to yours. Now, this is just an article. I'm going to read a little bit about it. And it says, the tech elites are lauded for their originality or influencing media, politics, and society at large with a kind of venture philanthropy, much as their industrial predecessors did more than 100 years ago. The activities of the Gates Foundation are a major example of what has come to be called Philanthro-capitalism. This term summarizes attempts by philanthropists to use market processes to do good, although this strategy is actually problematic as markets are ill-suited to produce socially constructive ends. Its advocates often expect financial returns or secondary benefits over the long term with their investments in social programs. Now, this right here is common sense because the question is, if Bill Gates gives so much of this money away, how is he still one of the top richest people in the world? Because he's not giving money away. He's investing money inside of ventures, even if they have a guise as being philanthropic or being a charity type of venture. He's not giving these people money without any expect of return. Philanthropy has become another part of the engine of profit and corporate control. The Gates Foundation strategy for development actually promotes neoliberal economic policies and corporate globalization. It is likely that Bill Gates, who has regular access to world leaders, as we just saw, and in effect personally bankrolling hundreds of universities, international organizations, NGOs, media outlets, has become the single most influential voice in international development. And he is. He is literally going all up and through the United Nations, telling them what's good for Africa. Again, the hubris of the situation. Africans were not smart enough to know what's good for us. Africans we're not in the know enough about our own conditions that we can advocate for ourselves. Instead, we need a white man who invented Microsoft to come to Africa, see what's going on, and then go to the United Nations, and then go to the World Trade Organization, and go to the IMF, and go to Davos, and go to all these big meetings and speak for us. The closer examination, I think I lost my place, actually. Yeah, here we go. Close examination of the BMGF, the Gates Foundation, is critical given that its influence is vast, indeed greater than most donor governments. The governments understand. So they're saying that this singular foundation gives more than even like many governments that are giving. That's how powerful the Gates Foundation is. It provides more aid to the global health than any country donor and is the 5th largest donor to agriculture in developing countries. In 2013, only 11 countries spent more on aid than the Gates Foundation, making it the world's 12th largest donor. The Gates Foundation has become a bigger donor than countries such as Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Ireland, and Italy. The trend to involve business in addressing poverty and inequality is central to the principle and funding of the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation. We argue that this is from a neutral charitable strategy, but instead, not from a neutral charitable strategy, but instead from an ideological commitment to promote neoliberal economic policies and corporate globalization. Big business is directly benefiting, in particular in the fields of agriculture and health, as a result of the foundation's activities, despite evidence to show that the business solutions are not the most effective. And that's something that has been shown repeatedly. The things that they're saying are effective at helping us are not the most effective. So for example, just saying, well, we'll just give everyone GMO foods. Well, if you actually investigate it, this is a lot what's causing a problem inside of the African soil. The soil, which does not operate well with these pesticides and all these things that you need in order to maintain those types of crops. And yet no one's going to question it because, hey, this is what's best for us because Bill Gates said so. Now, philanthropy, the dangerous thing about philanthropy is not just that, this person now gets to go to the United Nations on our behalf. The dangerous thing is when we start believing in these people as philanthropists. And the good thing, though, is that many Africans have been vocal about Bill Gates. But like I said earlier in the video, despite the fact that many have been vocal, despite the fact that many have told us that this man is not who he says he is, many of us are reluctant to join forces and actually oust this person. But I'm hoping this video will be enough for us to take this serious. Now, I think I have one more article that I'm just going to go into about what Bill Gates has been doing. And this one I was very much not aware of. And this is kind of going back to the problem with the vaccines. This is not a channel that takes a position on what you do with your body. But one thing that I think you should know is the risk of certain mandates having the effect on Africans' freedom. Certain mandates having the effect that all of us are going to have to be inside of a world where we're more tightly scrutinized. And this is something that Bill Gates is actually creating through something called the testing stamp or trust stamp. Sorry. So if you have not heard, Africa, this is basically actually released, I believe, last year. So I did not know about, 2 years ago. Africa to become the testing ground for the trust stamp, vaccine record and payment system. Now, this is what you need whenever you're exploiting a people. Whenever you're exploiting a people for their economic livelihood, you have to find a way to control them. And actually, I have one more article that shows something that he's doing that's going to show the surveillance system that's being installed by people like the Gates Foundation. So if you've seen that, the image I put up earlier, I put up something and it said that he has been funding something called Gavi. What is Gavi? So a biometric digital identity platform that evolves just as you evolve is set to be introduced in low-income remote communities in West Africa thanks to a public-private partnership between the Bill Gates-backed Gavi Vaccine Alliance, MasterCard, and the AI-powered identity authentication company called Trust Stamp. The program, which was just launched in late 2018, will see the Trust Stamp's digital identity platform integrated into Gavi's MasterCard, okay? A vaccine identity program is going to be integrated with MasterCard. A digital vaccination record and identity system that is linked to MasterCard's click-to-pay system that is powered by its AI machine learning technology called New Data. MasterCard, in addition to professing its commitment to promoting centralized record keeping of childhood immunization, also describes itself as a leader towards a world beyond cash, and its partnership with Gavi marks a novel approach towards linking a biometric identity system, vaccination records, and a payment system into a single cohesive platform. The effort, since its launch nearly 2 years ago, has been funded via a $3.8 million grant from Gavi, which is Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is serious. I hope we understand that the idea of having our information, our personal health information, integrated into something like MasterCard, and this is being tested on Africans inside of remote places. Now, of course, if they're testing it on us, one, it's because of the issue of our government structures. Our government structures are not such that our privacy or that our rights are going to be honored the same as in certain other countries, particularly Western countries. Because of the colonial states being supported by the military-industrial complex, they are allowed to take more severe, stringent measures against us. That's why when you go to African countries, many times you'll notice the military can take certain they can take leave of certain they can basically ignore your rights. They can basically take more stringent efforts to basically do things against you that you wouldn't have to be subjected to if you were inside of Europe or inside of the US, because they're, again, a part of the military industrial complex, and they're who are policing Africa. So imagine these types of things, these people who already are under more surveillance, and now they're going to be able to identify you and your health record and have that linked to your money system. This is being tested on Africans as we speak. Now, the danger is not just with the military. The danger is that if these mandates do go further and we see them kind of becoming more and more stringent inside of the African continent, you're going to see a people who are at the same time more and more disgruntled with their conditions, more and more disgruntled with the economic system. Now they have all of their information linked into not just their health records, but their financial livelihood. And so therefore, your ability to rebel becomes less and less likely. These are the things that are being done in the name of progress. These are the things that are being done in the name of post-COVID vax or post-COVID world. And many of us aren't paying attention to certain things. You know, one thing I actually heard is that there was some type of like COVID technology, and I wish I was able to find an article in time for this, where this some type of a way to identify the people, and already it was used by the police to identify someone. This wasn't in America. I think it was somewhere overseas, but already this type of technology was used to identify someone. Be very careful what freedoms you're willing to give up inside of this pandemic. Be very careful what things you're willing to overlook inside of this pandemic, because they are actively trying to find every single opportunity inside of this crisis in order to exert their own power, despite the fact that we as a people, we're just trying to get through. We're just trying to live. We're just trying to hopefully get to the next part of our lives. They're taking advantage of the situation in every single way. So one more article that I want to talk about, and this goes right back to the surveillance that we see the Gates Foundation pushing. And let's see. This one more article, again, something that many of us may not have been paying attention to. And this is not only just Africa, this is the entire world, but it affects Africa, because we should understand the biggest issue whenever you're exploiting a people is that the people at some point are going to rebel. And that is the fear with a lot of these globalists like Bill Gates. So Bill Gates has backed a $1 billion plan to cover Earth in Big Brother satellites capable of streaming live and unfiltered HD footage of the planet. Now, I think that the thrust behind this is that you have similar technologies that exist inside of certain countries, right? You have, like, if you look outside, you might be seeing a satellite right now if you're in the US, right? Or if you're in China or certain places like that. The African continent, however, does not have this mass surveillance that we have in this society. This is a problem to the globalists. They want to know where you are at all times. That's why they're pushing for internet access inside of Africa so that people could have cell phones that can be tracked. That's why they're pushing for things that are going to basically be given to Africans for free and basically be a way that they can track and know where they're going. And one of the ways that this is going to be done is through satellite imaging, which is already being done, again, in a number of places. So Microsoft's Bill Gates is backing a startup that will provide live and unfiltered high definition footage of every inch of Earth. The startup, Earth Now, plans to launch 500 satellites to cover Earth's atmosphere in Big Brother real-time video surveillance, as well as Gates' SoftBank CEO, Masayoshi Son, I think I pronounced that right, and aerospace giant Airbus are also backing the project. The price of the project can run $1 billion. Applications could include tracking illegal fishing, monitoring the weather, and tracking natural migrations globally. The question is, why is that your business? Like, why is it your business where people go? And this is another reason I know the response from him would be, well, we have to keep track of these things because of climate change. Climate change does not give you the right to mass monitor every single person on Earth. Climate change does not give you the right to know where I am, whether I visit my mom, my grandma. Climate change, how do you even make the causal connection between these two things? Earth Now's founder, Russell Hannigan, said, our objective is simple. We want to connect you visually with Earth in real time. We believe the ability to see and understand the Earth live and unfiltered would help all of us better appreciate and ultimately care for our one and only home. These are the things that are being pitched to us. The question should always be, and here's an image of some of the satellites, and this is the company Earth Now. The question we have to ask is this all you got for us? a life where we can eat these fake foods, where we can be trapped inside of a world where we're mass surveilled, where our health records are going to be linked to our money, where we are allowing our agriculture to die because the land cannot sustain these types of new technologies that you're creating? Is this the best that you have for us as a people? So this video is really something that I want, number one, to start our conversations more directly towards the implications of these types of surveillance systems inside of Africa, but also because we have to get people like Bill Gates out of Africa. And this is a call to all my brothers and sisters, wherever you are, we have to speak up for this, but particularly inside of the African continent. This is not going to come for the leadership. I started off earlier on showing you all of the presidents, all of the leaders who are meeting with people like Bill Gates, who are having these conversations, closed door, I bet. And these people are not going to push this person out. My current position is that we have to stop relying on these national reforms, national movements. We want African unity from national people, or we want African economic sovereignty from these national leaders. These national leaders have shown us who they are. And they might have some bright lights inside of this sea of darkness, but they're few and far between. Our leaders are not going to keep Bill Gates out of the continent. Paul Kagame is not going to kick Bill Gates out. Museveni, no, he's not going to do it either. Buhari or whoever's going to replace him, no, they're not going to do it either. It's really up to us, the people. And this can only be done from one, sharing information for those of us who are not aware, because guess what? And we're going to go to some of the health things that have been happening with Bill Gates. Many of us are signing up to basically be involved with these people, not knowing their other agendas. And so because some of us are dealing with crises and because of the colonial system, because we don't have access to healthcare, we'll be willing to take things from these charities, right? But because of that leaves us inside of a position where a lot of people are doing things without knowing. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that people know. We have to have an automatic understanding that something coming from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and many other foundations, any foundation, I do your research, but right now we're targeting Bill Gates. Anything coming from that foundation for Africa, we have to reject. We have to know this person has a hidden agenda. He's going to make money out of this agenda. He's going to get power out of this agenda. They're going to be able to surveil you out of this agenda. So that's one thing that we have to do. And number two, those of us who encounter these things inside of our communities, we have to be organized people. We have to come together. Once we understand the globalist agenda, it's on us to organize against that agenda. It's on us to tell other people in our community, do not go to that charity. Do not go to that place. That man does not have the interest of Africa in his heart. And the more and more we do this, the more power that they lose inside of the African continent. So hopefully we can start this conversation about the presence of many of these imperialists and have them consistently. And even though they might not be on social media, and I hope they're not just on social media, we have to make sure that while those of us on the ground, we are properly taking these things serious, and that we are going to actively make an effort to out these types of white imperialists whenever they come into our borders, giving us a Trojan horse. Hey, I'm going to give you better food. Okay, but the food's going to kill you. Let's think about that. So that's really all I have on this. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm going to just check to see if anyone had any questions before. I do try to leave time for that. But I don't see any question marks. So, or any at me. Oh, thank you so much. Viva Specifico. Thank you so much for your contribution. We really appreciate it. This allows us to definitely keep doing more. So thank you so much. You're much appreciated. And I think that's all I have for this. So you all, hope you have a positive day. We're going to cover this more and more into more depth, and we're going to get more into the other facets of the Gates Foundation, but this is just the start of conversation. So please share with our brothers and sisters, anyone who is involved or at risk of being involved. Share this with them, because we need to make sure that we get this person out of Africa, because he should not have any right to go in and out as he pleases. So with that, everyone, thank you all, and I will see you in the next video.